All right, welcome to another edition of the Forecast Contest. We're here with Dr. Lupo's class at University of Missouri on, what is it, November 19th, Friday, November 19th. Yeah, so just a couple quick housekeeping notes before I hand it to Dr. Lupo. So Dr. Lupo, as you just mentioned, we're going to hand it to you guys to lead our attribution today, talk about previous forecasts and such, so that'll be fun. And then we'll go through our a similar process as last time. We'll do the forecast, the sort of long version of the briefs, and then the 1 minute drill. The sort of if you're talking to catch the CEO in the elevator, assuming we have time for all that. And this is our last official forecast discussion, at least of the semester, with your class, which is kind of exciting. Just a couple quick notes with that. Oh, so a couple of folks trying to get in here. So just, for everyone who's here or who watches the video, we typically have the discussions and folks submit the forecast every week. It's volunteers as much as you want. So we hope some of the folks, even after the class officially ends here, we hope some of you guys continue to participate in the contest, either submitting forecasts, coming to the discussions occasionally, or both. And reach out to Michael or I if you have any questions on that. And just in case we run out of time at the end, because I know it's always short on time at the end, I just want to thank everyone here for doing this, for participating, and taking time out here. And in particular, I know not everyone's here, but our industry leaders here, like Dave D'Arcangelo and Michael, who's, I think, done a really nice job here, kind of leading our discussions and things like that. And of course, Dr. Lupo and his class. So thank you guys. If we don't have a chance to do that at the end, I just want to thank you guys now. And I just wanted to do one other thing here before I hand it to Dr. Lupo. We talked about how we'd like to get a little bit of feedback from your class, Dr. Lupo, like at least, from anyone who's there. I know it looks like we're kind of a small crowd today, but just like any ideas for improvement, and things that we could do better, something that worked well. And I don't want to leave out the industry folks. We're going to reach out to you guys, like Dave and Matt too, but we'll do that offline, because we'll find you guys in the next couple of weeks and stuff, just so we have more time to focus here on the students and Dr. Lupo. So yeah, with that, if I can, Dr. Lupo, and this goes for you too, and any of the students who are there today. Can you offer just again, idea for at least one of each, idea of improvement and maybe something that worked well?
Okay, yeah, I'll ask them to email those to me, and I'll collate them and send them back to you. But I would also like to appreciate David and Matt and the industry folks who have taken their time to help educate the students on some of the more practical aspects of the long-range forecasting. And again, I consider myself more or less a lab rat when it comes to my teaching and research. And so getting some practical advice from people who are actually out there and doing it for a living is wonderful. So.
Great. Yeah, thanks. And we'll, Dr. Lupo, will definitely, reach out to you again, over the next couple of weeks, probably after Thanksgiving or so. And just, maybe set aside some time just to kind of review. And after you get some of the feedback from the students and such, and we can all kind of talk about, potential collaborations again for the future. Cool.
Yeah, and I'll encourage the students to keep it up, to keep doing it through the spring, because it's again something you can put on your resume, either whether you do it as a team or whether you do it as a single person. But are we ready?
Yeah, and actually, just last housekeeping note. Just again, if anyone has interest in that that job announcement, that Dr. Lupo, did you have a chance to send that around yet?
I sent it, and it's an internship that would be really good for somebody to get. So.
Yeah, exactly. I would just encourage it, if you have interest in it. I would apply sooner than later. I think it's a really good opportunity. I know you guys are sort of in the middle of the country and this opportunity is in Connecticut, but I think again, it's going to be for the summer and it could be something that leads to a full-time position. So, even if you have just an inkling, I would say, reach out. It can't hurt, get some information, apply, go
Oh,
through the process.
absolutely. Nothing,
Yeah,
it can never hurt to apply to something.
that's right. That's right. So, okay. Yeah, with that, over to you, Dr. Lupo, for our attribution.
Okay, so looking at the last forecast, I guess I picked a real good one to volunteer for, coming getting way down on the list of folks. The verification was 76, and that was fairly warm compared to the 10 and 30 years of 87. And of course, I remember this one because Matt and I were both out on a limb on this one. And we thought that we were going to catch a cold wave, but we didn't quite catch that. One thing that's been concerning me with the long range forecasts recently is this tendency for blocking. And we've been seeing a lot of blocking pop up in the Pacific region, as well as the Atlantic region. And of course, we traditionally look for blocking in the Alaska sector for cold waves in the central and eastern US. And of course, when you get blocking out in the mid-Atlantic, that can also augur cold weather, especially for the eastern part of the US. And we've had this tendency to have blocking since about late September. You can see that since then, there's been blocking from about 120 to 0, 120 west to 0. So mainly in our part of the world, in the P&A sector. And so I think our forecast was reflecting a hedge against that, because one of the things that I like to look at is I like to look at what's going on with the observations. And if you look at the MJO hasn't done much lately. It's been kind of hanging out in the circle of death for the most part. And of course, it hasn't been much of a factor in our forecasts. We're still in fairly strong, well, maybe moderate La Nina conditions over the Pacific. And so I've been using my La Nina analogs to try to get a first pass at a possible number for our long range forecast. And like I said in class the other day, these La Nina type analogs are probably going to be a little more hit and miss when you're talking about a 5-day forecast. Again, because of troughs and ridges and things like that. But it can provide you a good starting point, and they're better to use obviously in seasonal range. But the La Nina analogs present us with a place to start. And then we also look at the teleconnections, especially now that we're into the colder season where these things have more of an influence. And 3 weeks ago, the Arctic oscillation was showing a more zonal type indication because you had these stronger positive numbers. And it was the Arctic oscillation's predictability out to 2 weeks. Well, it hasn't been that great, but it's been pretty strong out to 10 days. So we've been using that kind of as a guide, and we thought that maybe in the next 3 weeks, we would have seen more of a trend toward a negative Arctic oscillation or more meridional type flows, which we tend to get when we get colder periods here in the central US. The but the Arctic oscillation projections, as you can see, AO, I think, stands for all over, because of their AO predictions have been all over the board, even though they're correlating quite high. The PNA has been very predictable. I mean, the correlation out is at very high, out to 2 weeks. And so we were relying a little bit on that 3 weeks ago. You saw that there was a positive PNA about 3 weeks ago, and we were thinking that it would flip slightly into the negative. Well, no, we weren't. That was the next week. Sorry, I was looking at 2 forecasts. 3 weeks ago, we were thinking it would stay more positive, which would give us a little bit of a shot at cooler conditions. So that was our thought process. Now let me get to the forecast again. I thought I pulled the forecast up. There it is. And I'll show you the map that we had for this. Oops. Joe's not here. Joe contributes the models. I'm the observational data guy. He looks at the models and then we put our heads together. But again, we were thinking that things were going to be cooler in the east and warmer in the west. I still think that we're going to continue to see warmer in the west as long as we have drought conditions there. Drought tends to go with warm and dry. So as long as the drought conditions aren't improving, that's the way we'll probably forecast for a while. So this is what our map looked like. We were thinking we might catch a cold wave, but obviously we swung, and like the mighty Casey, struck out. So, and that's my my post-mortem on that forecast. So any questions on that? Or Mike, could you pull up the verification maps from the Maxar? I didn't get a chance to pull those up.
Yeah.
To see how those, to see how our map compared.
Uh,
Huh?
Stop sharing your screen share.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I gotta stop sharing. So.
that should. Okay, can you see?
There we are. It was warm in the west. We were just overly optimistic about what would happen in the east, and we whiffed on that one. You can see it's a little cool in the central, but wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. The east stayed warm. So I think I think that's you know, that just is a function of, I think it was a function of timing, because I think it was cold, but it was cold later. So, and maybe not. But I thought we missed by timing. We certainly didn't catch the severity of it. So we missed.
I think that's right, though. I mean, the timing, Matt talked a little bit about that last week, right? In terms of the timing. I think like the last week verification, right, was above the 30-year.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, we did, and I remember, yeah, it's like, but I think you're right on both ends. I think maybe it came in, at least as compared to some, maybe the extent of the cold and duration wasn't as much. And maybe it was a little later and then not as much, but it did, we did get the burst, we did get the change, but it's still been quite variable at the same time.
Yeah, and I think we had gone out on a limb a little bit, so we swung and missed. But
yeah, these are always tough. it's always, we always ask Dave Darkandja, I've probably asked him this like, half dozen times over the past year or two, but like, it's like, what do you do? How do you handle forecast periods that kind of look volatile? Not that you just, maybe you thought it was a little cooler, but even if you just think it's going to be variable and volatile, how do you handle those ups and downs when forecast timing, beyond day 10, beyond 10 days, it gets very tricky, right? To forecast the ups and downs and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, and I think on this one, we had a little bit of the opposite problem. Last week, I saw we had the right answer, but the wrong map. The map was,
All right. Yeah.
didn't really conform. And this week, the map kind of conforms, but we got the wrong answer. Because we did at least get some of that cold in the east. So.
Yeah.
Ugh. All right, any other questions on that? We'll leave some time for you guys to talk about your forecasts for this time. Our forecast for this time, we were buying into the notion of a cool early December that's been talked about a lot if you look at some of the chatter out there. But as Dave alluded to just a few minutes ago, the flow is trying to decide which way it's going to go, whether we're going to get cold or if it's going to stay a little warmer. So the forecasts are reflecting that. So.
Hey, Dr. Lupo, I'm curious, since you brought that up, what either from your group or other groups, what are they saying are the drivers of a potential, cold pattern in December?
I haven't heard so much about the drivers, but what I was looking at this morning was you've got now a fairly strong blocking in the Atlantic and in Western Europe. And it looks like an attempt at a blocking event over the Pacific. Usually when you get those big double blocks, we get sandwiched right in a trough. And I think that may have been the driver.
It looks like Michael's pulling this up. Or Michael, do you have the, if you, maybe
there,
just,
there we go. There we go. We got that strong positive anomaly over the Atlantic and Europe. All right.
So this is, all right, so today's the 19th. So now we're looking at the 11th through the 14th here.
Yeah.
Michael, you're driving, right? Can you just pull up like a 1 to 5 day map, EC or CFS 500?
Yeah.
Just curious what, near real time, what things look like.
Yeah, you got those two large high pressures.
And maybe global.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then basically the flow over us is more zonal right now. But I think I think it could go either way at this point.
Are you able to, like, maybe a 1 to 5 day? Sorry, this is my last request. Is your window's a little narrow? Are you able to like make it? Yeah, there. That's a little bit better. So I was just curious, Dr. Lupo. Okay, when you said the double blocks,
Right over, yeah, you can look over western or far eastern Russia there, and out in the Atlantic and the Britain. Right now, that
right.
blocking, and when both of them are there and they're both very strong, we usually get sandwiched into a trough. Although for that scenario, you want the Pacific blocking to be more over Alaska.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say, I look at the, this is just sort of visually speaking, but I look at that Pacific situation And it looks a little dicey to me, right?
Oh,
Because,
so far away, yeah.
right, like you don't want like if you're thinking cold in the middle part of the country, you don't want too much troughing over Alaska, right? Because then that's going to try to increase the jet flow and chinook all into the middle part of the country. So it's like it's right on the fence, though. You're right. Like if that ridging sort of over the Bering Strait shifts a little bit further east, then you've got the buildup of cold and
You've
but,
got that
yeah.
standard.
But then again, if it shifts just a little bit, more, then all of a sudden you could get a lot more troughing around Alaska, and then
Right.
so yeah,
Right, that's where it's teetering.
yeah.
I also have to wonder how much this dryness in the west is contributing this ridging here in the Pacific. You can see over North America a little bit and out into the Pacific, a little bit of a ridge pattern that seems to be coincident with the dry areas. So I wonder how much of that is drought feedback, if any.
Well, and Michael, that might be a good segue into our forecast. If you want to kind of switch gears and give each of the other groups and such a chance to talk about their forecasts and such.
Sure. All right, so I believe, yeah, so 11/16 is the forecast most of you just made. Taking a look at the numbers overall, it looks like most people are leaning towards a colder period. Let's see, a lot of big names up here: Dr. Lupo, Matt Lanza, Dave Darkangelo, and Industry One, which is Maxar, all thinking colder than the 30-year normal. Only one forecaster is below the 10-year normal. Then that would be Dr. Decker, who uses the CPC, which, looking at the CPC, they're quite warm in a lot of areas.
Yes, they are.
So we'll have to see how that works out, but looks like most people are on the colder side for this period. So without further
Michael,
ado,
just one quick, just in fairness to everyone who's forecast here, and Dave might be able to clarify this, but I do think the forecast, since we published our forecast on Tuesday, I do think some of these forecasts have shifted a little bit warmer. So including, what's that?
Oh, yeah, they have.
Yeah, so I don't know what the CPC was showing on Tuesday. I don't know when that was published. I didn't see it real quick, but it might be that the CPC was actually not quite as warm on Tuesday. I don't know. I'm just wanted to throw that out there, though.
they made this on November 12th, it said. So last Friday, apparently.
Okay,
Yeah.
then they've been warm. Okay.
I try to stay away from the CPC.
Yeah, they're usually on the warmer side. Whether it's going to be warm or not, they're always on the warmer side.
Right.
So yeah, so without further ado, let's get to the student forecasts. Now remember, you'll be doing the 1-minute drill / elevator pitch. And I just need to see.
Oh, wait, we're only doing the elevator pitch?
And we only have two pod leaders here today, so I'll be subbing in as a pod leader for some of these forecasts. So who would like to go first?
I guess we'll go. I'll go.
Go for it.
All right, which group are you guys?
We are Lawrence Boy.
Teams.
Okay, let me just find you in here. Did your guys' forecast get kicked to the next week? Yeah, I'm guessing this is your forecast. It just got pushed to next week.
How did that happen? Did you guys forecast late?
Yeah, if you do it after 12 p.m., it's unforgiving, but we'll fix it. We'll fix it for you guys.
All right, and is Dave Darkangelo your guys' pod leader, or am I? Or
Ours is Max.
okay, so then you guys can give your forecast to Dave Darkangelo, and whenever you're ready.
We're doing just the 60-minute or the 60-second quick one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, hi, everybody. I'm Eric Gallahan. I am a part of the Team Savoy group. And we went with a little warmer than average with the mean. We went with 114.7, sigma of 25. A little uncertainty into what we want to do, or what it's gonna. There's a little uncertainty there with it, with us doing the mean of 25. We went with a blend of 25 climatology, 25 GCF and GFS and ECF composites. We went with a little more confidence in the Dynacast, as we did with, as you can see, with the 50%. The uncertainty with it is the blocking in central Canada. Could be a ridging pattern over the western part of the country. We aren't sure whether that's really going to become zonal or not. If it does, then we'll go with more of the climatological average. And if not, there will be warmer in the west and cooler in the east, and the mean will balance itself out with warmer in the west, cooler in the east. And that's all I have.
Okay, I'm not sure.
I'm on. This is Dave.
All right, Dave.
So, hey guys, that was
sorry.
yeah, no, good. It was good. If I can ask one question is, how have your forecasts done recently, and has that increased or decreased your confidence as you make this forecast?
We've done pretty good so far with our verifications, and that is on this one. Different in the west and the east, and we're not sure on that. We're pretty confident.
Okay, great. I didn't hear the end of that, but it sounded good. The reason I asked that question is that sometimes we increase our sigma, or we show a lower confidence because the data is suggestive of that, and then sometimes we do it because it's a little bit of self-preservation. If some of our forecasts haven't verified well recently, we'll tend to kind of convey that in lower confidence, but that's a fair way to play it. Good job.
Any other questions?
No questions.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we can head to the next group. Thanks, guys. Does anyone want to volunteer before I pick somebody?
Yes.
5 guys is up.
All right, 5 guys. Who's your pod leader? Never keep track of this.
Rogers.
All right, you guys can have Dave Margolin. So once again, 1 minute elevator pitch, and whenever you're ready.
All right. My name is Clayton Lieberman. I'm in 5 Guys. Our forecast for this period is 118 warming degree days with a spread of 14. That is just slightly warmer than the 30-year average of 120. So what we're looking at here, the main question is a blocking event in the western part of North America. We see a pretty strong ridge pattern over there. And then we also see we're leaning towards having a trough in the eastern portion of the United States that will offset that warm in the west. Almost all 4 of our resources are very confident on a warm ridge continuing to exist in the west, and there's some disagreement on the depth and the strength of the trough in the east. We are putting more trust in the CFS and the Dynacast, which have a pretty deep trough in the east, which kind of counteracts that ridge in the west, making it around an average forecast. However, the ECM and CPC, when we did our forecast, had a weaker trough and almost more of a zonal pattern with warmer weather all across the US. So that is the risk, is that we'll have overall a warm forecast, more so than what we said and what the 30-year average is. Questions?
Hey Clayton, this is Dave. Yeah, I thought that was good. I especially like the beginning where you provided a reference. I think that's really important. Again, this is not academic, right? So it's like, think of me like I don't know, you're on the elevator with me, and I don't have anything in front of me. So, if you say like 115 HDDs, if I'm I don't know, a trader who's really in touch, I might know what that benchmark means, but there's a good chance I don't. So I liked how you quickly said, like, that's slightly above or below normal or whatever it was. I like that. And I liked how right after that you kind of then you gave me the most important sort of headlines, and then you went macro into sort of the pattern a little bit. I was thinking, let's do. I want to do this one more time, just because I think we have a little bit of time here. Mike could tell me if we're not, and I want to give you guys as much practice as we can, because I think this is helpful. Well, a couple other things I think you could throw in there is with the you could reference the market, and in this case, we'll I don't know. The market could be the bulk of the other forecast here. Could be like, industry, if you want. Like maybe it's most simple to say industry here. Where's industry? So you guys were you're I'm sorry, you guys are part of Five Guys, right, Clayton?
Yep.
So you're 118. I'm just looking at the screen. And where's industry here?
I think
Industry is 126. Okay, so let's say industry represents industry, right? So, again, I'm a trader or whatever. So I'm always thinking like, all right, what's Clayton's forecast as compared to the market? Is there an opportunity here? Is Clayton significantly warmer or colder than the market, right? So that's a bit of information I think in an elevator pitch would be really important. Be like, hey, yeah, our forecasts say slightly above normal as compared to the market. We're actually significantly warmer, and here's why. The market's going with the ECMWF, and we're waiting more on the CFS. And then you might even give a little bit of reason to that. So, but outside of that, the only other thing that came to mind, the market piece, and just when you're doing, again, this is a learning process. I don't expect you to know all this, and we didn't prep you with all this. I'm just thinking as we go. If you're on the elevator with the CEO, he's probably not going to know, or she's not going to necessarily know Dynacast and stuff like that. So again, try when you're thinking about it, when you're doing these things, and it's hard, right? And that's what we're doing. But think about like what your audience is going to know, right? They're not going to be as technical as you. So again, you might not say things like Dynacast or something like that unless you absolutely know that person who you're talking to on the elevator knows. But you might say where like, we're, you might talk in terms of more generic terms, like the bulk of the data is near our forecast. And so we feel, moderately confident or whatever, or, there's some data, it's a little bit warmer. There's some data that's a little bit colder. We're kind of splitting the goalposts a little bit. You might talk a little bit like that if you don't think they're going to know. And same thing goes with like NAO and AO. Again, they may not know the acronyms, but they may generally, you may be able to speak in terms of like, hey, there's going to be this big blocking pattern, which is going to drive cold south or things like that. So let me stop there. I know I gave a few different things, but I wanted to try to be thorough since this is our last call. Before I give you another chance here to go over it, any thoughts on that or questions?
No. I tell you where you're coming from. I didn't realize the elevator pitch was supposed to be more geared towards like someone who's maybe not as technically knowledgeable, but that makes sense. I can definitely like kind of.
Yeah, and I'm throwing a wrench in you. So let's do it. Yeah, because we did it. Like, so okay, so go do it again. This time though, assume you're talking to me again. I really don't know technical weather terms, but I do. So I'm jumping on the elevator. We're jumping on together, and I'm like, Clayton, what's going on with the weather today? What are the main highlights?
Sure. All right, so I'll go ahead and start again. My name is Clayton Lieberman. I'm part of Five Guys. We are forecasting 118 heating degree days, which is just slightly warmer than the 30-year average of 120. Basically, what we're looking at is we're going to have some warm weather in the west. All of the models that we use are indicating warm in the west. Some of the models are indicating average or maybe slightly warm in the east as well, whereas others are indicating cold in the east. So for that, we are putting more trust in our models that are indicating cold in the east. They've been more reliable for us. We think the warm in the west and the cold in the east are basically going to offset and create right around average. Industry has it as a slightly colder than average forecast with 126 warming degree days. We think there is an opportunity to perform well against what everyone else is doing if they zig, we zag. We think that ours is more accurate, and what has happened since Tuesday tends to support a warmer forecast as well. So it's leaning more towards our favor, and ours might even be too cold. It might even be warmer than where we're at right now.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you talked about the pattern, and I liked how you talked about the market. And these aren't easy things. These aren't easy things, but very nice job there. I'm sorry. What was the gentleman's name who went before you?
Eric.
Eric, would you like to, again, I know this stuff not easy, and don't worry about messing up, but would you like to give it another go too?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Cool.
Yeah.
And you could talk to Dave D'Arcangelo again, but I'll listen.
Okay. Hello, David. My name is Eric Gallahan. I'm part of the Lawrence Support Group. We went with a mean of 114.7 HTDs, which is a little warmer than the climatological average. Little uncertainty into what the actual final product is going to be. We went with a spread of 25. And our uncertainty led us to use a good blend of about a quarter climatology or climatological average, a quarter of the GFS model, the European model, and then the 50% was the Dynacast, the warmer outlooks. So again, the spread was a little high, a little uncertainty. There's ridging off in the west and a troughing off to the east. That looks like that might happen, but other than that, looks like we're going to be kind of a little warmer than average based on that.
Good. That was solid. And I think Dave brought up some good points about referencing the market. Sometimes the question will come around of like, what is everyone else thinking? Or, if I could poll 10 meteorologists, what would they say? The benefit of the contest here is you get to kind of see where everyone else is sitting. But in industry, you don't always get that benefit, and you don't know what they'll be communicating in terms of kind of what is an important or salient point regarding the pattern, right? There's not this, we can't go poll 10 people for their week 3 forecast. But I do think that the reference to the warmer than normal is important because it gives us this where this kind of forecast sits. And then, mentioning the uncertainty. And the other thing I could add maybe is you have a sigma of 25. Like, what would be a normal sigma for the third week in November for a forecast right about now? What would be a kind of an average sigma?
I would say in the middle. 16, 17.
Yeah, that's fair. Just to reference that, like saying like we have a 25 and typically it would be mid-teens.
Okay.
It just gives people this kind of in their mind. It's like, okay, well, I kind of see where their confidence lies, or not only confidence, but kind of maybe where the spread of possible outcomes might be. And then the other thing I would add maybe is to reference like, we're on the warm side of forecast, and then your predecessor there, he actually made a comment which caught my ear, but which is we're forecasting warm. The forecast the last few days have continued to trend warmer, and we think that it still may trend warmer now. So if I could pair both of your team's comments, which is your sigma of 25, and also their reference of kind of where we've gone the last few days, those are really kind of important factors. So the blend of those two, both of you brought up important points, not just with the sigma, but also kind of where we're going and what we think it might miss. So sometimes the question will be, if this forecast misses big, which side does it miss on? And you both kind of capture that with the large sigma, and then the previous one, the reference of we think this could miss to the warmer side, right? Those are both kind of important factors. And as you're talking, this will happen a lot. As you guys were talking, I'm texting my boss, with some comments on the forecast as we saw it late this afternoon for this time frame out in like early mid-December. So I wasn't copying it, but I was in my mind, I was like, oh, they're saying some things that, so you'll have that idea behind like doing that. And I was just doing it. And I'm sitting in the parking lot at a Starbucks. So that kind of what happens in the industry here. So, but good job.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was just going to add, because I thought it was an important point, that about the confidence thing, that it struck me too when you said something like 25. I almost stopped you. I was thinking to myself, again, if you're on the elevator with someone and you tell them that, the spread is 25 HDDs or whatever, they may not know what that means. Context matters. So I would have just changed it in your head already. You probably had some level of, okay, that's, there's a couple ways to do it, but it might have been just enough to say either low, moderate, or high confidence, depending on your audience. And just that's probably how I would have phrased it. Like, yeah, our forecast is slightly above normal and we have X confidence, high confidence, low. And then if they ask you what high or low confidence was, I doubt they will, but depending on who the audience is, they might, then you could give a little bit more detail.
Okay.
Okay, one more team.
Yep, we have last but not least, I believe, just go back to the spread here, the derechos. And since we're missing a third industry guest, you'll be giving your forecast to me. So whenever you're ready.
All right, my name's Andy Ritzma. I'm with the team, the derechos. Our mean was 124.7 heating degree days with a medium confidence. We're not too confident. We don't have low confidence either. We tended to put our trust in the colder data sets. So we're thinking a ridge trough pattern is going to set up over the United States, with the West Coast being warmer, with the East Coast being colder. So we went on the colder end compared to the averages, but we're still a little bit warmer than the industry. Our risk would probably be if the trough ridge pattern was to move slightly to the east and push away that cold air from the east and be warmer than what we are expecting. That's about it.
Okay, thanks. So I have a question. I noticed you put the CPC 3 to 4 week temperature outlook in your formula. And I'm just wondering, because I see the CPC, I'm looking at it here. They're looking quite warm. How do you, what do you think the odds of something like this happening, where we see both a warm west and a warm east?
We didn't think this was going to happen, so that's why we only put 5% of our outlook into the CPC. Compared to normal, we usually put around 25%, but we thought it was going to be cold on the East Coast, so we didn't put that into our forecast all that much.
Okay, and I'll just say I think that's important that you said that, because a lot of times there's a whole bunch of different opinions out there, and I think it's important that you stuck with your guns. You thought it was going to be cold in the east, and you said, okay, CPC doesn't really jive with that, so we reduced our formula intake for that. So I think that's good. That's all the questions I have. Anybody else have any questions? See, I notice we have a chat here. Sarah says, good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add, Andy, that I liked the small details, but I like how you used the term colder data sets. I thought that fit well into what we've been talking about here. Again, if you're on the elevator with someone who doesn't know the models too well, instead of like spitting out like EC blah blah blah, GFS blah blah blah, just saying colder data sets. Our forecast is in line with some of the colder models, colder data sets, whatever. That's probably good enough. Again, if they want more detail, you have it, it. But if you're on the elevator with the CEO, just saying something like that, I think is a good way to put it. So I like that.
And like the other group, if you'd like to go again, we still have time for that. If you want.
I don't think I'll need to go again.
All right. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left, and I believe that's all the student groups. Does anybody want to either A, hear about somebody else's forecast, or B, have any questions about this forecast or the contest in general or forecasting in general?
Yes, take the time to ask some questions now. This is it for the semester. You've got questions on LRF, how to present it, and things like that.
I have kind of like a specific question about this forecast. Someone earlier mentioned droughts in the west. Is there any way to like kind of look into the likelihood of that in a long range sense? Like obviously if you're looking at short range, you can kind of predict if they're gonna get rain or not, but how are you gonna look into that, 2+ weeks out?
So usually, and I don't have a lot of experience with this, but so if somebody else wants to chime in, feel free to interrupt me. But usually, I believe the way they do it is you would look at it from a seasonal perspective. So, for instance, I believe La Niñas are generally drier in the West. Specifically like California, I believe La Niñas are not considered to be, they're a little on the drier side. So that would be, that'd be an indicator that, you might have some drought conditions. Obviously, if you already have drought conditions in place, that also can, believe it or not, worsen the drought, tends to work that way out in the West. The drier it is, the tends to be even drier later on. So usually in those cases, that's how you would look at that. Then there's, I see we also have a question from Sarah. There's usually also, I'm not exactly sure what you would look for to find this, but there's those atmospheric river events that can run into the southwest. Some of those can sometimes set up, and usually, from what I've read, that they're fairly well telegraphed. I'm not, not like super well, but well enough that there's a degree of confidence. It's about a week out, I think. That's
Well,
yeah.
Michael, you can also go to the National Drought Mitigation Center's site because they have a page on there where they actually project out a few weeks and tell you whether they think it's going to improve or not. So there is a page where you can go to get somewhat of an outlook for that. Google National Drought Monitor. That one has that one will have the maps, and yeah, and you can look underneath some of those headings and things. I think there's a page where you can see whether it's going to improve or get worse or stay the same. Yeah, there it is. The outlooks.
Yeah, so it looks like,
It's like they got it staying the same.
which I mean, I guess it's not getting any worse, but I guess it can't get much worse at that point anyway.
Yeah. So if you're doing a long range for 3 weeks, that's a good thing to keep in mind. But we've still got that problem out there.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have Sarah's question, and I think it's a good one, and I'm going to open this up to everyone here to answer. Are there any other items you would suggest us to look at when making a long-range forecast other than using the CPC, looking for blocking events, weather models, etc.? So I don't have a specific answer for you, Sarah, but I do have my recommendation would be to look at all the people forecasting. I think Dave D'Arcangelo was your pod leader. So you can look at his formulas when they're available. You can look at Matt Lanza, Dr. Lupo, who else we have here? Dave and myself, Max. Dr. Decker as well, even though he uses the CPC. But basically, I would look at the other people forecasting and see what methods they're using, and start there. Does anyone else have any other tips for other methods to use for forecasting?
No, that's pretty good.
Hey, Dave.
Let me just chime in on that. Yeah, I think I wrote something in the chat. It's always good. It's very important, I think, to have a sense of a model of the skill of the parameter that you're using. Like, what is the historical skill? Like, do we have predictability of something like NAO, and does it matter, right? And how much does it matter for making a forecast? So we reference these teleconnection indices, and we use them, but we have to understand that their predictability themselves may be nil in the time period that we're talking about. And I think what ends up happening when you're in that space of something with very low predictability, it becomes challenging to stick with a formulaic approach on a day in and day out basis, in part because you recognize how poor that ends up being, right? Like, so I guess if you're in a very consistent weather regime, like a very strong El Nino or a La Nina, and the weather is being kind of driven by that base state, a formulaic approach may be most appropriate. But when the weather is changeable and volatile, it becomes really tough to kind of stick to your guns. And the one challenge that you end up having is that if you make forecasts every day and you're constantly getting a new stream of data with regards to, say, model data, it becomes tough to kind of put one forecast out, plant the flag, and kind of ride that out. We do that in this environment because we have a way to kind of benchmark and kind of measure against it. And I think it's really insightful. But I hope everyone has this appreciation for, there's no kind of right or wrong answer here, right? You can kind of sometimes hit the right number, but then miss the kind of theme of the forecast. And the challenging part is there's always new forecasts coming out. So I'm not sure that that's the answer that Sarah was looking for, but in the industry, it becomes this constant game of there's constantly new information coming out, and we're sitting here on a Friday afternoon. A lot of these forecasts were made on Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning. There's been a ton of information that's come out since then. And some of you referenced that, and I think that's important to kind of reference kind of how forecasts have gone. They've trended warmer, they've trended colder, et cetera, et cetera. So it becomes challenging. I've always found it difficult to use a formulaic approach because there's, and the market that you're referencing is always, when I say the market, I mean your customers, right? Your customers aren't always interested in just, I want the 16 to 20 day forecast on this day, right? It becomes a lot more nuanced than that. It's important that we do that here because, again, we do want to benchmark against something, but the challenge is that it's less clear when you're sitting on a trading desk or you're dealing with a customer and they're like, there's always that, yeah, but. So like, I made a forecast that's warm. Yeah, but I got other information that came in. Oh, okay. So I have to kind of constantly update that. And then I hope everyone got an appreciation for how difficult these are. These are really challenging forecasts to quote unquote kind of get right? Like, I don't know how you get graded in this, but my grade would mostly be largely like a D or an F. I know if I was getting graded, because we make this one single point forecast, but in the real world, you're constantly getting feedback on how that forecast may be performing, and you can constantly adjust that. I don't know. That's a long-winded answer, probably to maybe hope it tried to answer the question.
Hey, Dave, can you comment on one other thing, if you don't mind? I know we're just but analog method.
Sure.
You're exposed to analog method a lot in the market, I'm sure. Matt Rogers, I know at CWP. Analog method. You may or may
Sure,
not.
sure,
Can you just
sure.
give your 2 cents on that too?
Sure. You'll get a whole host of opinions on it. It's a very controversial subject, right? So what Dave is referencing is the analog method, which is that you come up with a set of parameters that look like previous years, right? And you can do this any number of ways. You could do it on low frequency signals like sea surface temperatures. You could do it on more high frequency signals like blocking events or ridging or troughing in parts of the globe, or certainly like MJO. And when you look at past years, you can say, well, based upon these factors like, Pacific sea surface temperatures, blocking signals, we think this year could look similar to late November, I don't know, pick a year, 2008, for example. And then you can say, well, that could be a template for my forecast. So that is one method. The difficult part is, right, we don't really have a lot of sample. The sample size is still pretty small, right? Like what's a relevant sample size? Maybe 70 years worth of data, and the possible outcomes, are always much wider than our sample size would indicate. But it is a method by which you can say, well, this year has some similarities to this year in the past, right? Like just a basic La Nina. Well, is it like a 2020 La Nina, or is it like a 2007 La Nina, right? Like, so you can kind of cope with some of those comparisons. It's a way to kind of form a basis for maybe a starting point. But I have always found that it's very nuanced. And I can honestly just admit the last time I actually had really made a good analog forecast was the winter of 2002, 2003. So I'm going on almost 2 decades of failure with analogs on seasonal forecasts. And then there's also that interplay between, are analogs useful at the seasonal level, which tend to be driven by kind of some of that more low frequency kind of stuff, or are analogs useful at the intervals that we're interested in, which is like the 16 to 20 day, where there's more synoptic high frequency weather events that will be at play. I've contended that the analog, we're challenged to use analogs because the possible outcome of the last 70 years, we need literally, 10 times or 100 times more data points to suggest that analogs would be useful. But they are a starting point, and it is one method.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're out of time here, and I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. So thanks everyone for coming, not just to this meeting, but to all the meetings, and hope to see you again. Hope you continue forecasting, and strongly encourage you to continue forecasting as well, especially if you're interested in pursuing a career in the field. Other than that, thanks everyone, and great job.
Yep. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yep, happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope to see you guys soon.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.